Hello my strange and charmed ones, welcome back to my channel for another video. Today I'm going to tackle a topic that I'm asked about all the time, and it has to do with performing a brain dump. Okay, so you may have heard me talk about this term before, a brain dump, but maybe you're not familiar with what it is. So essentially, a brain dump is when you take all of the ideas and information that you've been storing in your brain and put it into some sort of more permanent or archivable system. Now, this idea of a brain dump, at least for me, I'm not sure where it really originated, but for me, the idea of a brain dump comes from David Allen and the book Getting Things Done. And he has this wonderful explanation for doing this. I think he might call it a RAM dump. I think that's what he calls it. Brain dumps go by a lot of different names. RAM dump, mental download, brain dump, all different variations of the word brain or RAM or mental or download or dump, right? So there's a lot of different terms you can use to describe this activity, but I call it a brain dump. So in Getting Things Done, David Allen talks about this RAM dump, that essentially it's a necessary part of being a productive and organized individual, because our brains, everyone's got one, right? Our brains are not meant for storage. They're meant for processing. Now, this idea of RAM, right, comes from the idea of a computer. Inside of a computer, there is an element called RAM that stands for, I think it's random access memory. It's the component of a computer that actually helps your computer to quickly recall information and process applications. So if you open up, Photoshop on your computer, or you open up Microsoft Word, your RAM is the part of your computer that quickly accesses that stored information. Now, of course, the information is not stored on your RAM itself. It's stored on another component of a computer that has a really good analogy to the brain, which is your hard drive. So your hard drive is the place on a computer that stores all of the information. And I think that, the point that David Allen makes in Getting Things Done, that it just makes beautifully, in my opinion, is that a lot of us think that our brains are hard drives when really our brains are RAM. It's not for long-term storage, although of course our brain does store all of the information in our lives in terms of visual memory and long-term and short-term memory, remembering people's names, remembering directions, things like that. There's a lot of different sorts of memory that go into our brains. But our brains aren't meant to remember every single person's birthday. It's not meant to, keep an accurate running list of all of our to-dos or all of our scheduled tasks. So our brains, we as people generally are treating our brains like a hard drive that's for storage, when really our brains are more like RAM for processing information. So the idea is that if you're someone who stores too much information up in your head, you are actually clogging up your memory so that you're not able to process information as quickly or as accurately. And that's going to have a devastating effect on your productivity and your organization. So you want to do a brain dump regularly to get things and ideas out of your brain and onto either paper or some sort of electronic system, because your brain cannot be counted on to remember every single minuscule task or event or important piece of information in your life. So that is what a brain dump is. So I hope I did a good job of explaining that to you guys. So then we get on to the actual activity of doing this brain dump, right? So when I sit down to do a brain dump, which I like to sit down as frequently as possible to do a brain dump, I like to do at least one big brain dump. I say big brain dump, where I sit down and I focus a good amount of time and energy on taking things out of my brain and downloading them onto paper, right? So I do that about once a month. However, I like to keep a weekly brain dump list in my planner for any random things or ideas that pop into my head that are not scheduled, they're not on a project plan, they're not on a to-do list, they're just ideas that I need to process through later. So I like to keep a running list in my planner for brain dump purposes. Now, what do you need to perform a brain dump? You don't need very much to perform a brain dump. The first thing and the most important thing you need is a dedicated amount of time where you can sit quietly with your thoughts. I think that's the hardest thing for most of us to acquire, is the time to sit down and focus on this activity. Once you got that, you're most of the way there. After time, the next thing that I personally use is a notebook and a pen, right? Just something for me to write down whatever is coming to my mind that I need to keep for future reference, or just something that's in my head that doesn't need to be there. I can write it down on paper. If you're an electronic person, feel free to use a computer or a tablet or a phone to keep this brain dump list. But pen and paper works well for me. I like the tactile experience of writing things down. I think it's very cathartic, and so it works for me. The last thing that you need, which I hesitate to say that this is something you absolutely need, but it's something that I've found is incredibly helpful, is an incompletions trigger list. Now, I know that sounds like a big term, and if you're not familiar with it, you're probably like, huh, what are you talking about? Okay, so an incompletions trigger list is essentially just I have like a printout that I like to use. I've been using this for a while, that basically helps you to stimulate memory for what are the things that are in your head that you might need to write down. So on this incompletion trigger list, it'll tell you, like, do you have any bills you need to pay? Are there recipes you're trying to make? Do you have any upcoming events? What are the important tasks? What's happening at work? It's essentially a printout that asks you questions that you can process through in your own brain, and hopefully it will help to trigger things in your brain that you're storing that really should be written down onto paper. So like I said, there's this great incompletions trigger list that I've been using for a super long time. I'm gonna leave it linked down below for you guys because I think that you guys might be interested in it. I've shared it before, but no harm in sharing it again. And also, I tend to also use kind of like my own trigger list as well that kind of just works well for me as like a blogger and an online business owner and an entrepreneur. So I'm also going to go ahead and leave you guys a link down below for where you can kind of get an extra triggers list that I like to use personally. So basically, once I have all of these items, my time to actually sit down and process the brain dump, a pen and a paper, and some incompletion triggers list to help me get started with my brain dump, then I'm ready to go. Okay, so here's the process for how I do a brain dump. There is no right and wrong way to do this, but this is my video, so I'm gonna tell you guys how I do it because it works for me. Okay, so I will sit down at my desk with that notebook, with that incompletions trigger list, with all the time that I've got devoted to this brain dump task. And the first thing I will do is start just running through my memory, and anything in my head that's popping up, things that I need to remember, I just start listing them down in this notebook, okay? So anything from to-dos, business ideas, blog post ideas, things I've forgotten, errands I need to run, things I need to pick up at the grocery store, recipes I wanted to try, birthdays that are coming up, gifts that I have to buy, things that I have to mail, things that I have to go pick up. Anything that I have in my brain, I write it down, okay? So the point of this is that you do not want to stop and choose what you're gonna write down and what you're not gonna write down. I write everything down. And just like when I'm brainstorming, when I'm brain dumping, it's so important for me to write everything down and don't care if it looks sloppy. You know, I just use a generic notebook that's not like necessarily something that's important to my planner so that my type A brain doesn't like blow a gasket because I'm making this crazy sloppy list. But write everything down that comes to mind first. Then after that happens and, you know, I've written everything down and I can't think of anything else on the top of my head, then I turn to the incompletions trigger list because the purpose of that list is to help me stimulate ideas that I forgot. So I will go through the triggers list, and again, anything new that pops up gets written down on the brain dump notepad, okay? And I can fill up a page, 2 pages. It's not uncommon for me to fill up like 5 pages, okay? With all of the things that are being stored in my head. So once you get to that point, once you're done, you've gone through your own mental process to write things down, and you've gone through the incompletions trigger list to write things down, then essentially you've completed the brain dump, okay? So you are done, right? You finished a brain dump. You've gotten everything out of your head and onto paper. How do you know you're done? There's nothing else popping up in your head. Your brain is suddenly silent. And at this point, you should probably feel an immense amount of weight come off your shoulders. Because scientifically, they've pretty much proven that once you do this, once you've made a list of everything that's on your head and put it onto paper, a weight is lifted because you suddenly feel like, oh, I don't have to carry around this baggage, this mental baggage anymore. Now, you might be thinking, well, after you write it down, what else do you do? Like, what do you do with that information? Well, what you do with it is whatever you decide to do with that information, right? So for me, I do tend to go back through once I'm done writing everything down and I start categorizing things. So I might use highlighters for this. I might just use little icons and star things or circle things to kind of group like items together. If I've got a whole bunch of business ideas, I will put them all on their own separate page, like in my planner, in a project plan. If I have a whole bunch of blog post ideas, I will put them in my planner on the pages where I track blog posts or YouTube videos. If there are events or things that I need to schedule, I will go ahead and put them into my planner. But to be completely honest with you, a lot of times when I do a brain dump, there are things that are just written down there that have no place right now. So what I tend to do with those things is I will look at them and I will make a judgment. I will say, okay, task, you aren't something I immediately need to get done. You're not something that is a task for me. This was just a random idea. And if it's not an idea that I feel like, oh, I really need to do this for my business, or oh, I really want to do this for my house, or oh, I really need to do this for whatever reason, I will sit and look at it and go, okay, is this just something that was a great idea that you're never going to do? Or is this something that you want to remember for long term? I sit quietly, ask myself that, and whatever my gut reaction is, I go for it, okay? Because the truth of the matter is that we all have a bazillion ideas in our heads at any given time. I know bazillion is such a scientific term, but you know what I'm saying. We get a lot of ideas that might sound like wonderful ideas and we want to hold on to them. We don't want to forget them. But the truth of the matter is we're never going to act on them. They don't have an immediate need. They don't even necessarily have a long-term need. They were just a really great idea, okay? So you have to make sure that, you know, if you do want to go through and process that list, which I do recommend because it's something I personally do once I've done a brain dump, I will go and process through that list. Put things where they belong, right? A place for everything and everything in its place. Anything that needs to be written down in your planner, anything that belongs on a project plan, anything that belongs on a specific task list, put it where it goes. Everything else, process through it and do a gut check. Is it something that's necessary or is it something that's not necessary? If it's not necessary, strike through, leave it there. If it is something that you feel like is necessary, maybe for long term, you may just want to kind of keep a long-term, like deferred ideas list, either in your planner or on your computer or on your phone somewhere, so that maybe one day when you're sitting around bored, right, you can just go to that list and go, I think it's time for me to do this random task now. So that is my process for brain dumping in a nutshell. I hope that this was informative to you and maybe inspired you to do your own brain dump. If you do, of course, I want you to let me know about it by either leaving a comment down below or go over to Instagram, and once you've made your brain dump list, I want you to take a picture of it, tag me at MissTrenchcoat, and feel free to use the hashtag CharmedGTD so that not only I can go back and look at the picture over and over, but everyone else in the community can search that hashtag and see what you're up to, get some inspiration, and you know, we can keep each other accountable. So I do really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you like these sorts of productivity tip videos, let me know. Tell me to do more of them, and I will. Of course, if you have any other questions, leave them in the comments section down below. Don't forget to check the description box of this video for some links I'm going to leave for you guys, including that incompletions trigger list and my own personal list that I like to use as well. And if you're not yet subscribed to this channel, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button for more awesome videos by me. And until next time, bye-bye!